Hello students, welcome to COM 425. This is week 2 and I will be providing you with information related to culture and organizational communication and the implications they have on each other and in the workplace. So as we look at the agenda, you'll see that we're reading chapter 3 and 4. We're watching 2 videos related to the course content as well as completing a discussion board that's due on Friday and with replies due on Sunday, and our midterm topic rationale assignment. So as we move through the content, you can see this week we're providing some reflection and analysis on communication networks and ones that we're a part of. We can look at this in terms of social media, workplace settings, living environments, church groups, whatever that may be. The main thing I'm looking for is for you to identify a group communication network you communicate within and you identify with, and then as well as looking to see how this communication network functions, providing hierarchical perspectives, organizational behaviors and norms. Those can be implied or explicit, how you fit into the network, what the interdependence is and permeability is in terms of influence in the function of the network, as well as an overview of how culture is or is not influential within the communication network as a whole. So what we're starting to do is starting to look at communication networks and organizations and how they function within our personal life, because there's many different options and many different varieties of that and how we interact with each other. So then later we can start to look at how that affects organizations as a whole to be able to analyze that from a more broader perspective. So in your midterm project, which is not due this week, it's due in week 4, you will be analyzing a company's organizational communication process and structure. There's a list provided below of companies that you can choose from. Each company selected here are known for having a very solid and stellar organizational structure that's been evaluated not just by employees but also by outside agencies. So you'll need to select one of the companies from this list. And so this week what you'll do is you will identify the company from the list provided, write a 300-word rationale, which is a 300-word explanation or justification for choosing the company that you would like to look at for your midterm project, and then include a list of at least 5 sources you plan to use within the paper with a brief description for each source. So really what I'm asking you to do is an annotated bibliography if you're familiar with that. I'm looking to see in 300 words why you've selected, for example, Warby Parker and why you think they are a good company to analyze and provide critical reflection on in your midterm paper. And then I'm looking for 5 sources you plan to use with descriptions about each of them. And what do I mean by brief description? I mean I want to see about 2 to 3 sentences that tell me what that source is and how it relates to your topic. I am looking for scholarly sources. I'm looking for scholarship that shows organizational structure and things of that nature that relate to maybe some areas you may want to identify in your paper. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to select one company from the list, 5 sources, as well as a brief description of each source. If you have any questions, let me know. We have plenty of time to reach out to each other and chat about that and see how that may work for the midterm. I wanted to spend some time now briefly going over what culture and ritual are. This week we look at human resource influences within organizations as well as culture and how culture fits in with that and human relations and such. So this may be something that is common to you or well known to you already. If you've taken some of our other courses, you may have already looked at culture and communication and some other aspects, which is great. You're ahead of the game on that, and you should feel very proud to already have that advantage over some of the other students. However, it's important to kind of relate it to how it relates to organizational communication at this point. So it's argued very much so within the academy that culture is semiotic, meaning its systems of meanings and signification and symbols are central to both patterned conduct and individual frames of mind. Human behavior is a part of symbolic action in which the foundation of speech, pigmentation and paint, line writing, and sonnets and music take place. Ritual action is communal and is traditionally influenced by communicative interactions and behaviors. It's important to know that we identify culture as being subjective. That means there's many ways of interpreting it and many things that we can assume that culture is related to, meaning it could be different to each of us. My interpretation of culture could be different than what your interpretation of culture is, and that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just identifying that there is a difference in how we perceive and what we perceive culture to be. Culture typically is referred to as the norms, systems, and interactions within a people group. That people group can be identified in a number of different ways, in a number of different capacities, but it's important to see that we're looking at the norms, the systems, and interactions within a group of people, identifying them as having one particular thing. So when you think about culture of a nation, many things come to mind. Some consider U.S. culture, for example. We might think of some values of that many Americans hold true: freedoms, independence, hard work, achievement, and such. But it's important to know that as we consider that, there are many different subcultures or other cultures within that. There's use of using a cultural metaphor for investigating an organization, meaning we are looking again at the qualities that make an organization what it is. What makes Google different from Apple, and so on and so forth. So when we look at this, there is not necessarily a prescriptive approach to culture. Rather, it's important to see that there are many different aspects that make up the personal flow of a culture within an organization or within a people group. So there are 5 characteristics of ritual that shape culture. This is formalization, meaning the formalization of particular tasks and processes within communication and interaction. Traditionalism, a specific way of doing things over a period of time. Invariance, rule governance, and sacramental symbolism. So when we look at that, it's important to see how that relates to organizations and how we're going to extend that conversation within many different ways. One thing I did want to point out from Chapter 3 is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's important to see that in looking at human relations and approaches to organizational communication, that we need to know and understand that Abraham Maslow developed his hierarchy needs over a period of many years as a general theory of human motivation. It tells us how likely people are motivated to do things if they have met these personal needs. He and others applied this theory extensively to organizational behaviors, and has honestly really served as a prototype of human relations approach to organizing and management. Maslow proposes that humans are motivated by a number of basic needs. These 5 types of needs are consistently presented in many different ways, and the first 3 types are often referred to as lower order needs, meaning they have to be met in order to get to the final 2 stages of the higher order of needs. So these needs are, as you can see in the graphic, a physiological need, safety need, affiliation need, esteem needs, and need for self-actualization. When we look at the first 3 steps, we realize that if these needs are not met, we're not going to have positive interactions or human motivation to continue with the other needs. So if our physiological needs, our safety needs, or our affiliation, our love and belonging needs are not met, then we're not going to be able to move to high esteem or high self-actualization. Remember, self-actualization is a person's motivation to reach his or her own full potential. Maslow characterizes this need as a desire to become more and more what one is to become everything that is one capable of becoming. So in other words, it refers a lot to some of the slogans we hear in the Army: be all that you can be, and things of that nature. Clearly, this need will take different forms for different people. However, it's likely that an organization can facilitate the satisfaction of this need through provision of a job that allows the individual to exercise responsibility in the workplace. So as we keep this in mind, it's important to know that as we structure organizational communication or move into leadership positions or manage the flow of communication within an organization, that we need to make sure that the people that we're communicating to, our audience, our publics, have where they're at and what has been met for them in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, especially if we're looking at self-actualization and esteem. Esteem really refers to the desire of individuals to feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment, and needs to be divided into external and external and internal esteem needs, and to understand that from many different perspectives. So obviously there are some benefits to each level of Maslow's idea within a job. So the first 3 steps, at least the first 2, should be provided by employment, the monetary compensation they receive, breathing, they have food, they have water, they have sleep, they have health and property through benefits and things of that nature. And the other three can be met through the organizational culture and communication that is provided in the workplace. They can feel a sense of friendship in their love and belonging, their affiliation to their job. Esteem can be provided by managers in terms of helping them feel a sense of achievement and accomplishment when completing tasks that are worthy of that. Self-actualization can help them reach their full potential, help them to see their morality, creativity, ability to problem solve. So it's really, really important that we keep that in mind as we move through and looking at the human relations approach to organizational communication. As we move on a little further, we're going to take a look at something in Chapter 4. This is developed by Carl Wilkes. It's his theory of organization, organizational information theory. It's called OIT many times, and this is really a phenomenal theory because it's one of the most well-known organizational theories of information that focuses specifically on communication. And so this communication theory offers a systematic insight into the unique ways information is disseminated, which is sent and utilized throughout organizations, based in large part on the seminal studies undertaken by Carl Wilkes. It's the core principle around his belief of organizations being process-driven rather than structurally driven, so they're driven more on the process of completing the job rather than on the structure of the organization, and that the role that there is acknowledgement to the role of the flow and evolution of play in driving most work endeavors. Really what we're looking at is we're looking at some of the evolution of play and driving work endeavors and placing a strong emphasis on reducing levels of messaging, equivocality, and uncertainty, which normally can exist in a dynamic and information-rich environments. This interdisciplinary approach to organizing information provides the desire to eliminate both ambiguity and complexity, the ambiguous and complex nature of workplace messaging that builds upon earlier findings from his general systems and phenomenological theories. So when we look at equivality, we're looking at the idea that there are a number of rapid moving parts within an organization. The foundation on which messaging is received can constantly shift, thus leaving room for unintended consequences relative to true intent and meaning. When this arises, communication outreach can be given in different interpretations because there is substance to ambiguous, conflicted, obscure, or introduces uncertainty into a situation. Organizational information theory can provide a knowledge base and framework which can help mitigate these risks through decreasing the level of the ambiguous nature present during relevant communication activities. Simultaneously, it can also serve as a construct whose potential for growth stems from active use of communicating and organizing to reduce the amount of equivocality within a specific domain. So when we look at reducing equivocality, organizations experience continuous change. This is true, we know this, and they're ever adapting as opposed to the change followed by a period of just being stagnant. Really, to build off that idea, it's important to know that this theory explains how organizations use information found within the environment to interpret and adjust change to reduce uncertainty. So in the event information is available and the information environment is highly equivocal, the organization engages in a series of cycles that serves as a means to reduce uncertainty about a given message. A highly equivocal message might require several iterations of a behavior cycle. An inverse relationship does exist between the rules established between the organization and to reduce equivocality and the number of cycles necessary to reduce that effectively. Similarly, more cycles used, the less equivocality remains. So there's three ways to do this. This is an enactment, where there's a role of action in enacting change within an organization through individuals or existing data or existing knowledge that can help them make sense of the change or the conflicting information. Selection is used, where this is upon analyzing information in the organizational processes. We can utilize a selection stage to include any outstanding information necessary to reduce the equivocality. The information must decide the best message for the organization must decide the best method for obtaining and remaining information to be disseminated. Retention is the final stage where the organization sifts through information it has compiled and attempts to adapt to change and determines which information is beneficial and worth utilizing again. There are choice points within the behavior cycles and assembly rules. This is when information messaging remains unclear. Variables and organizations will usually revert to a number of organizational information theory-based methodologies. This is through choice points, describing an organization's decision to ask, should we attend some aspect of our environment that was rejected before. Behavioral cycles, which represents the idea of deliberate communicative activities on part of the organization to decrease ambiguity. Assembly rules signifies a broader construct, which may include evaluating how standard operating procedures are carried out, along with chain of command designations, and looking at the nature of this approach to explore protocols within that. The last thing that we kind of look at is sense making, and sense making has been used many different times in communication, and Weick really spends some time in his theory looking at sense making systems, which incessantly create and recreate conceptions of themselves all around us. In a less clinical perspective, Weick and his collaborator Sutcliffe jointly describe sense-making as an action which involves turning circumstances into a situation that is comprehended explicitly in words or speech that serves as a springboard to action. This does rely on the idea of cognitive dissonance, where we are reducing dissonance to gain consonance, and results from this experience in the narrative. We will create narratives to fit the story to serve as a buffer and guiding light for further renditions of the story. When we look at sense making, there are critical facets to that. It starts with noticing and bracketing information, labeling to make sense of it, retrospective, looking at it in hindsight, as well as presumption, making presumptions about the information. It's about social and systematic change, it's about action, and it's about organizing through communication. The idea of sense-making has been a theme in organizational information theory for a long time. Organizational sense-making contrasts with organizational interpretation. When an organization interprets information, there is already a frame of reference in place that is enough information for an organization to change course and reduce that equivocality. There is sense-making occurs, however, with no initial frame of reference, but rather does look at the connection present itself. According to Weick, sense-making can be driven by beliefs or actions. Beliefs will shape what people experience and give form of what their actions will take. For example, disagreement about beliefs in organizations can lead to argument, and that's a form of sense-making in and of itself. When we look at Weick's theory, it's important to know that the idea of a theory of organizing information is that organization exists in an environment. Weick is clear through that this environment is not merely a physical environment, but it's an information environment. And furthermore, information environments of an organization do not exist out there in an objective matter. Rather, individuals create the environment that confronts them to the process of enactment and being able to look at systematic perspectives into the way that we communicate and the way information is sent and utilized or ultimately disseminated within an organization. So I know there's a lot of information about this theory of organizing, but it's very foundational and pivotal into how we look at organizational structures and communication within an organization. So as you look at your midterm projects, it's important to think about this theory and think about how these companies that you can select utilize this theory of organizing information and how they communicate with one another to create their corporate culture. Just an idea. So to recap, as we look through the agenda, we're reading chapters 3 and 4. We're watching 2 videos related to theories within the course text, as well as completing discussion board number 2 by Friday with replies due on Sunday, and our midterm topic rationale by Sunday. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you this week and pray you all have a blessed week. God bless.